Hi everyone, it's me, Ed, from the VGMbassy. I am adding this little part of the podcast in because when you listen to the show, you're going to notice that my voice is really muffled. And it was because my guest, Eric, and I had some technical difficulties when we were trying to get set up using either like Discord or Skype or any sort of communication software to record the actual show. And in tweaking stuff on my end, I accidentally, somehow ended up recording the entire show using the microphone on my webcam instead of my studio equipment. So I was absolutely mortified when I went back and listened to my voice, and through a lot of extra tweaking and some EQ stuff, I was able to get it sounding good enough to be released for a show. I mean, I've definitely heard worse voice on other podcasts and have considered it passable. I just wanted to kind of put this little addendum before the show to head off any emails or questions I might get from you guys. Also, first-time listeners, if you're listening because you're really interested in the Messenger and you're just discovering the VGMbassy, I didn't want to give you the impression that as a host, I was using really bad equipment to record my voice. This is normally how you would hear me sound on other shows. So anyways, you guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope it doesn't deter you from the show. And Eric was a fantastic guest. He was around for the entire development process of the Messenger, so he has insight not only as a composer, but as an insider in the development team. And everything you wanted to know about the Messenger, you're probably going to have all your questions answered when you listen to this show. Again, thank you very much. A big thank you again to Eric for hanging out with me until almost 1 a.m. my time to put this show out. And please enjoy. You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land, we celebrate music. In this land, we celebrate games. In this land, we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VGMbassy. All right, welcome, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the VGMbassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name is Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. So today's episode is a pretty special one to me because it's about a game that I have spent the last 3 weeks or so really deep diving into, and I finally beat it yesterday just in time to do a show on it, and I've got the composer of the amazing soundtrack here with me. The game is called The Messenger, and it came out just a couple of months ago, August 30th, 2018. It's developed by Sabotage Studio and published by Devolver Digital, and it's out on PC and the Nintendo Switch. And the music is composed by Rainbowdragoneyes, otherwise known as Eric Brown. Eric, thank you so much. It's an honor and a thrill to have you on the show with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. What a treat it is to be here.
I've been listening to the soundtrack like crazy in the car, at work. It's really cool because, I'm a huge chip fan and a video game music and chiptune artist. I love the Genesis music. I love FM. I love Nintendo soundtracks too. And this is a great soundtrack because it combines both of them. So, Eric, in your own words, why don't you kind of explain maybe how you got into composing for The Messenger, how this whole story came about?
So, basically, Rainbowdragoneyes has been an active chiptune project since 2007, I guess. So actually just missed my 10-year anniversary. I didn't even celebrate because I forgot, but whatever. Yeah.
Well, happy belated anniversary.
Hey, thanks. But so yeah, I started out like I just discovered chiptune music by way of MySpace, and I was a Bit Shifter, I think, was the first dude I found on that.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Oh yeah, he's basically my dad. So I basically just wrote him. I was like, "How are you doing this? This is so cool. I've never heard anything like this." And he's like, obviously making music on a Game Boy. I'm like, "How is that possible?" And then he wrote me back like a day or two later, and was like, "All right." It was like a 1.5-page reply. It was like, "Here's the software. Here's a link to the hardware. Here's a link to some tutorials," and just kind of gave me some like. He basically just let it all out. Just laid the groundwork essentially, and I took that and ran with it, and I just started making dance music on my Game Boy. And then I come from a background of death metal, so I eventually started working vocals into the mix. Long story short, I was doing that for a long time, and then Thierry from Sabotage found it somehow. He listened to my stuff a lot, and then I was on tour with a band, and we were going through Quebec City, where they're based out of, and he showed up to the show, and he had this whole pitch, like he was ready to try to like sell me on, doing music for his game, and I basically just like cut him off, and I was like, "Yes, I'll do music for your game." It was just like, this guy's clearly has his shit together. So anyway, that was kind of that, and then we just started chatting, and then he was just building the prototype around then. So the Autumn Hills track, which is the first level, I did the 8-bit and the 16-bit version of that track probably over 3 years ago at this point. Yeah, it was probably like late 2015. And that's still the track that's in the game right now. And as they were just working nights and weekends building the prototype with just working with like gray blocks, trying to make the gray blocks fun to control. And then once they had that, they started adding all the art and everything started coming together. And, eventually it wasn't going to be like this bi-dimensional thing. It was just going to be probably just a platformer. I mean, who knows? But it eventually morphed into these like 2 different games they wanted to make. Like, what if we just did them both? And so that's where the whole dimension shifting thing came from, I believe.
That's really cool. So you've pretty much been part of the team since the get-go, more or less, right? So you've been kind of watching the whole development cycle of the game?
Yes, since inception, and it's the first game I've ever worked on, so you'll have to forgive me if I sound noobish in any of my replies.
Not at all, man. So this gentleman you were talking about, Thierry Boulanger, he basically created Sabotage back in 2015, 2016, because in interviews I've read ever since he was like 8 years old and he played Ninja Gaiden for the first time, he just absolutely fell in love with that kind of game and just desperately wanted to make his own side-scrolling platformer video game, and just kind of like had this idea brewing for like 20-something years, and finally was able to get the resources together to pull it together. So that's really cool that he kind of seeked you out just from kind of discovering you on the web. I was curious about that too. So when he originally approached you, had you had any experience with composing an FM style music at all, or was it just NES Game Boy style stuff?
I've done some. I have a Yamaha synth, the FB01, and it's an OPL chip very similar to what's in the Genesis.
Okay.
And it's like a rack mount synth module. And I actually got one of those because of Alex Maurer back in the day. And he was doing FM stuff. I'd never really heard FM chiptune. There's people like Animal Style do it really well, and Oxygen Star. And he does a lot of ad-lib stuff like Sound Blaster.
Yep.
But I grew up as a Genesis kid, so it's a very important sound chip to me, and definitely work more with the Game Boy to start because I love the portability and I travel a lot, so it's really handy for having that around. And then I basically got into FamiTracker just by virtue of working on this project. That's what it required me to do.
Yeah.
But if you learn one tracker, you can learn them all, I think. I mean, they're essentially the same. They work a little bit differently, and the keys might be a bit different, but that's pretty much the thing. And I definitely did way more FM on this project than I have probably ever in my life. So
yeah, and it works really, really well. So
nice.
So the concept behind the game is that this ninja character, he's the messenger, and he's got to take this scroll from his ninja village all the way to the other side of the island that he lives on, and things just get absolutely insane as he's on this journey, and he ends up doing this kind of time travel through these portals. And when he goes into the future, like, it starts off as an NES style 8-bit game, and then the future world takes place in this 16-bit world. So the music on the fly just switches from NES style music to Genesis music, and then back and forth kind of instantly. So when you were composing this music, like, did you start off in the 8-bit mode and then like up convert everything to 16-bit? Like, what was the process behind those compositions?
For the most part, I basically programmed every song twice because I'm using trackers and I'm using 2 different programs.
Okay.
And that was the best way to do it, I felt, in the most genuine and authentic way possible. So for most of the 8-bit tracks were written first. There were a few 16-bit tracks that were written first that I converted down to 8-bit, which just involves me opening up another program and plugging all the notes in again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little tedious, but had to be done. So like no one else would do it, and they hired me to do that. So that's what I was doing.
Cool. So what did you use for the Genesis? Was it just a VST with?
Oh no, it was a tracker. It's called Deflamask.
Oh, okay, very familiar with that. Yep.
It's multi-chip, so it does have the NES chip, but it does not have VRC6, which I was using very heavily. Yeah, I was very heavily leaning on that in FamiTracker. So I started off in FamiTracker, and it just kind of ended up that way. Deflamask, I still feel like it was pretty stable. I mean, it got me through and did everything I needed it to do. You could change the clock speed to get tempos in between. I haven't tried playing it back on a Genesis, but theoretically it does work because it's all there, and I could even have the file format.
Yeah, I've got a couple friends that compose in FM that have written tracks in Deflamask and have given me the files, and I put it on my EverDrive and have actually played the files back on the Genesis, so it works really, really well.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I was thinking about was like, because my EverDrive's on the way. I just got one recently, so but I was messing around with the clock speed and kind of entering my own clock speed, because if you just kind of change the speed and tempo settings, there's like huge leaps in what the actual BPM of the song is.
Right.
So you have to enter your own clock speed, and so that's the only thing I'm actually kind of wondering if will translate to the cartridge, but we'll find out.
Yeah, I probably could break the song, especially when you do it on a real hardware.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, and yeah, it's still like kind of an early program, but it's pretty spot on, and the dude's really cool, and I was most starstruck, I think, than I've been in recent memory when he hit me up on Instagram saying he liked my stuff. So it's like, wow,
that's awesome.
The guy that makes the program that I wrote these songs in likes my shit, so that's kind of cool.
Very cool. All right, so let's get into some of the music from the game. We're gonna start with a track. One of the first tracks that you hear when the game starts up. This one's called A Ninja's Respite, and it takes place in the Ninja Village in the 8-bit world. So, Eric, when did you compose this song? Was it kind of early on in the songwriting process, or?
It was kind of halfway through, maybe. At the time, we didn't really know. We knew that Ninja Village was not really a gameplay level. It was more of the tutorial level for lack of a tutorial level.
Yeah.
It just kind of lets you get familiar with the controls before it throws any challenges at you, really.
Yeah, there's a couple of practice dummies that you can practice hitting and doing the cloud jump and stuff.
Yeah. So, and it was like the very start of the game, so it had to be kind of, set the tone, if you will. And I just kind of slapped this thing together, and that ended up being the theme of the level. So
awesome. All right, well, let's take a break. We'll listen to the track, and we will be right back. All right, we're back. That was A Ninja's Respite, Ninja Village 8-bit from the game The Messenger, composed by Rainbowdragoneyes, Eric W. Brown. And
That's me.
That's you. You made this stuff.
I did that once.
I can't help but make some connections to one of my favorite composers, Tim Follin, at the beginning of this track. Are you familiar with him at all?
I am familiar with him.
And so just that beginning, it sounds very like Solstice, or that it's very kind of dramatic introduction with a lot of very textured and very, how do I say this, like almost bespoke soloing at the beginning. Every note's got its own little personal touch to it. And then it kind of transitions into this sound that we're going to be hearing probably, throughout most of the game. It's very dancey. It's got melodies that complement the rhythm, but it doesn't draw too much attention from them. And then it's got this kind of like hopefulness over this kind of bass line of like real dark, funky, gritty bass. So I think this song does a really good job of kind of setting the listener up for like what they're going to be hearing.
Nice.
Throughout the game. Was that kind of like an intentional thing, or am I just kind of?
Yeah, sure. It's honestly, I feel like people could tell me more about my influences than every time people ask me my influences, I just feel like I'm on the spot. Mm-hmm. Because every time I sit down to write something, I'm always scared to death that I'm writing something that's already been written. It's just an ongoing thing I've always struggled with. Like, you listen to a lot of different stuff, and once I'm happy with it, that's when I feel like I'm accidentally ripping someone off. Prior to that, I'm like, is this even good? Which it isn't.
Well,
until it is.
I've listened to a lot of chiptuners and a heck of a lot of video game music over the years, and this doesn't sound like anything that I've done. So you're good on that front.
Well, that's sick, because the one thing, I don't know, I'm influenced a lot by what I don't hear in music, I think, as much as I am with what I do hear in music. And I think, at least when I first started the Rainbowdragoneyes project, it was sort of a way to do something different in a genre that I was very comfortable with, and then bringing in influences from other places that had no place in this genre. For instance, death metal and black metal.
Right.
That was kind of what drew me to like the live performance. I wanted to be more intense, like the metal shows I'm used to going to.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really hear a lot of that in the chiptuner space.
You really don't. I mean, they come from, I don't know where they come from. They come from all kinds of places, but in the metal worlds, I feel like people are more open-minded these days, but, starting out like 10 years ago or whatever, you'd be hard-pressed to find people in the metal world that also loved pop music and dance music and Eurobeat and all kinds of stuff like that. There's two kinds of metalhead, I always feel. There's the kind that's really elitist and close-minded, and it's just, Slayer or GTFO kind of thing. And then there's the other kind, which is very warm and accepting and open-minded and like the sweetest person you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
So, but these days, people are more open-minded. Metal is like way more broad than it ever has been. And it's not really fair to use that comparison anymore.
Yeah, and that's my brother too. I'm not a huge metal fan myself, but my brother, huge metalhead, but also would listen to rap and pop and everything else. And so
it's just the idea of immediately ignoring other aspects of life or music and just kind of casting them aside because you had this idea that it's not cool or it's not good, and you sort of have that assumption before you even know why.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Pigeonholing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just kind of a wasted time to be that way.
Yeah. In
my opinion.
And I totally agree. And it's great that you're bringing a lot of that influence with you to this music, because I think it really helps. And I do see nods to stuff like the Ninja Gaiden soundtrack and composers like Tim Fallon and other people that have done NES and Genesis music, and it's all kind of mixed into one giant kind of musical soup in this soundtrack, and that's what keeps it so interesting, because you're going back and forth to all these different levels and you're hearing these songs over and over again, and you don't really get tired of it. In fact, I would look forward to. I'm like, yes, I got to go to the glacier level next. I'm going to hear that awesome song. So, and none of the songs ever really sounded like they were all the same. They were all very easily distinguishable from each other. So.
Well, yeah, that's good, because if any intention that I had, it was that what you just said. Like, clearly, people are might play this game. They might be stuck in a level for however much time. Like, I don't want the song to sound annoying after a while. I want it has to loop. That's kind of part of the thing, is that it has to loop until the end of the level at least. And you don't know how long that's going to be. It might be 2 minutes, it might be 5 minutes, it might be 20 minutes. And you don't really want people to get annoyed and have to turn the sound off.
Yeah.
And I sort of was thinking about that. So in terms of the way I write stuff, I guess that's really the only difference, was knowing that it had to loop at a certain point versus have like a finite ending.
Right, and that's one of the interesting things about video game music, is that they have to be able to be played infinitely without the user or the listener really almost realizing that it's looping, until they're sitting down and really concentrating on it. So,
right.
But let's move on to our next track. So we've talked a lot about this transition from 8-bit music to 16-bit music and how the game kind of handles that. So going forward for the music that we've picked for the podcast, what I've done is I've kind of cross-faded. We'll start off with the 8-bit version of the song, and then at the loop we're going to cross over into the 16-bit version, so you guys can get a feel for what each song sounds like in both modes. So our next track on the list is called Harness the Winds, or Harnessing the Winds, depending on whether it's 8 or 16-bit. This is from the Howling Grotto stage. So let's take a listen to that, and we'll be right back. All right, we are back. That was Howling Grotto, Harness the Winds and Harnessing the Winds for the 8-bit and 16-bit version from the game The Messenger, composed by Rainbowdragoneyes, Eric Brown. Now, I don't know, man. First time I heard this, I thought kind of like a goth rave anthem.
Damn.
Yeah, very like the stuff I like in the early 2000s, late 90s. I was a goth kid, so I would always go to these goth clubs.
Nice.
And the music is always very, very similar to this.
Do you have the Hot Topic pants and everything?
Dude, Hot Topic was my jam back in the day, so not embarrassed to say it. But spiked collars, the whole thing. So
oh yeah, all that stuff.
But at least the beginning, the song really reminds me of something I'd hear from like Covenant, Assemblage 23, any one of those like EDM bands I used to listen to back in the day.
Before it was called EDM.
Before it was called EDM, yeah, it was kind of like electro-industrial or whatever you wanted to call it back then.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this track really reminds me of that. And then the lead line comes in, especially in the 8-bit version. And we were kind of talking off air a little bit about, tracking music and not using too much automation and really giving every note like your individual attention. And I feel like that's really prevalent in this song. It's a square wave as the lead, but there's never just a straight square. It kind of bends, it pitches up and down.
Yeah, that's cool that you say that, because I mean that's how you make chiptune music sound good.
Yeah.
Is giving every note your individual attention. Is because you only have so much to work with.
Exactly.
So what you do to that is, that's how you bring it to life. So.
Right, and that's what makes it interesting to listen to on listen after listen after listen when you're playing the game, because your ears are constantly picking out these little details here and there, and it's not just...
And it's fatiguing to listen to for long periods of time if you listen to just square waves all day.
Exactly. But, on the other hand, the 16-bit version really kind of fills this song out, and you get these great stereo effects.
That's the dev's favorite 16-bit version is Howling Grotto.
Yeah, and I don't blame him.
That was the biggest, I think, leap is in terms of the sound world, if you will. Yeah, I don't know. That was one thing.
Yeah, it seems to have a much warmer sound, and you get some like distorted guitar tones in the lead, and a lot of really cool distortion effects. So as far as a drummer goes, because I know that's your deal, that's what you do in Necrogalbicon. How do you approach drum programming versus playing live? I mean, do you play something live and then try to track it after that, or?
To be honest, feel like I'm pretty sparse. I don't. Okay, this is actually a loaded question. So. There's some songs where that's the focus, and I'll start with the drum track. There are other songs, like, I didn't even realize this until somebody pointed it out to me. So, on my album, The Primordial Booze, which is an album I put out in 2011, there's almost no tom fills on the whole album. And I didn't even realize that. I'm just, like, making songs. It's, like, really fast. There's a lot of kick and snare. And you can tell where the beat is and where, but there's just not a lot of actual, like, tom fills. I'll do, like, fills between the kick and snare, but I think that was just me sort of in my head, like, it has to be super limited, like, number of channels or whatever. But, yeah, so I don't know. I sort of will sort of rhythmically evolve melodies, and I'll maybe, like smash a beat somewhere and then kind of make a melody out of that, or vice versa. I'll come up with a melody and then the beat just sort of forms itself around the melody. And in this case, for this track specifically, I think I was like, there aren't really enough triplet feel, like 3-4 beats in the game yet. There ended up being a few of them, but it started with this one. It was kind of an early on track, the 8-bit version was. So yeah, I just like had that grid laid out for me. I was like, this needs to be like a triplet sort of dancey thing. It was like you just get the wingsuit, and so you're kind of enjoying flying around with the wingsuit and having a good old time. So it was more about that. And the triplet feel just kind of felt natural in that context.
Yeah, because this level has a lot of like air vents. So when you get that wingsuit, you can glide onto these air vents and shoot yourself up to the top of the level and then kind of glide down again. So you get this really cool feeling of flight, and you get this great groove going on behind you. Works out really well. So that's very cool.
Nice.
So yeah, the beginning of the game is the game kind of like has two different personalities almost, and that's not even talking about the 8 and 16-bit worlds, because the first, I guess it's about the first half of the game, maybe the first 1/3 of the game, where it essentially it almost feels like a Ninja Gaiden clone. So you're only doing the 8-bit world, and it's a very linear game. You're going through a level, fighting a boss, next level, fighting a boss, kind of ad infinitum. So we're only really hearing the 8-bit soundtrack for the first third of the game. And to me anyways, when I got to the part of the game, I don't want to spoil too much as far as plot goes, because if you haven't played the game, you really, really should. But at the point where the 16-bit levels start entering into the fray, the FM stuff almost sounded like, I don't want to say wrong, they just sounded really different, really weird to me because I wasn't used
jarring.
to it. Yeah, very jarring. That's a great word. And the more I started playing and going back and forth, the more, because I'm an FM head too. I love FM music. It's my favorite sound chip for VGM, and
nice.
And I was thinking, that I would love it immediately, but the NES stuff just felt so familiar by that point. I was like, I don't know about the FM stuff. And the more I played it, and I sat down and I bought the soundtrack and I started listening to it really good in headphones, I'm like, okay, now I understand where he was coming from. I felt like, and I think the reason why it was so jarring is because there is so much difference with the stereo and the warmth of the tones, and they almost feel like completely different songs if you're not kind of hearing them back to back. So
yeah, like doing two versions of each song was kind of an excuse to basically remix myself.
Yeah,
and try new things. Like with the VRC6, the number of channels was about the same. Maybe I had like one extra channel to work with in FM, but they definitely had stereo. Like NES doesn't have stereo, so there was more to play around with in that realm. But also, it wasn't just like making a second version of the same song. It was like, people are going to be experiencing this level and this song for the first time, and it should feel like it's not just a revamp of something that's already been done. It should feel like its own thing.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And as the game kind of plot-wise shoots you into the future, it needs to feel like a more advanced version of the song too. So the little extra melody lines here and there that you have with the extra channels available to you really kind of help make it feel like it's a song from the future, whereas you're listening to the present in the NES world. So nice job with that for sure.
Thanks, man.
So let's get on to the next track. I know you were talking about 3/4 time and some triplets here and there. I think this next track coming up has some of those as well. This is the song from the Quillshroom Marsh level. This is Quillshroom's Horrors and the Queendom of Quills. And this is kind of a forest level. It's been corrupted and infected by evil mushrooms. It's got a very spooky, almost kind of Marilyn Manson quality to it in places. So let's take a listen and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Put that neck brace on. That was Quillshroom's Horrors, or The Queendom of Quills from Quillshroom Marsh, from The Messenger, composed by Rainbowdragoneyes.
What a game.
Yeah, one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack, for sure. Actually, you know, as I was going through the game, I'm like, from the get-go, being a person who's really into video game music and wants to share video game music with other people, you know, I'm always listening and concentrating on the game's soundtrack as I'm playing, because it's like, I want to pick out, oh, this track might be great for this kind of a show, or I might want to do an entire episode on this game. And you know, at the beginning of the game, I was like, yeah, the soundtrack is really good. I should probably share some of these tracks. And every time I went to a new level, I'm like, oh my god, this song is great. Oh my god, now this song is great. Oh my, now I was finding myself like, how am I going to pick which one song I want to play as maybe an indie game show or something.
All right.
And by the time I got through the whole game, I was like, damn, man, I just want to share this whole thing. Let's just do a show on the Messenger.
Sick, let's do it.
And yeah, and so that's when I reached out to you, and this was definitely, I think, where I finally kind of clinched that decision. I think it was when I got to the FM version of Quillshroom March that I was like, yeah, we just need to do an entire episode focusing on this. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I really like this. Very spooky, very kind of like
super spooky.
Yeah, John Carpenter on crack, like that. those ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It feels very, you know, Michael Myers is around the corner. He's gonna come stab you in the back or something like that.
Yeah, it's a spooky level. So
was this level presented to you as like a spooky level that you needed to write kind of a Halloweenish style song for?
Basically, so I would get briefs for each level. And it was just a Google Doc with some text and a few like Google images, like concept art kind of stuff.
Okay.
And it was like, here's the tone and here's kind of the story about why the messenger is in this level. And that's all I had to work with. And
gotcha.
I would just kind of sort of try to get into his head and think about how to best convey that through song. And there was definitely spooky, cursed fungus world. So
yeah, for sure. And speaking of getting into his head, this messenger character, he doesn't really have a name that's actually said in the game. So he's just, you know, referred to as the messenger.
That's right.
He's kind of a slacker, you know. He at the beginning of the game, he's
a bit of a layabout, a shiftless layabout.
Exactly. He's got this team of ninjas in this village. They're kind of like the last humans left on the planet. It seems, according to the story. Yeah.
Bless their hearts.
And his sensei is always kind of like ragging on him because he's like, why am I training? I don't really care. You know, nothing really matters.
Yeah.
And of course it starts to matter a lot because bad stuff goes down.
And then he ends up saving the world. Who knew? Spoiler alert, he saves the world.
Oh,
sorry.
Man. I think people could kind of gather that.
Yeah.
Being a hero in a video game.
If you see it through to the end, that's the one spoiler you get out of this.
There might be a couple other ones as we go on throughout the songs, but I don't think that's a very major spoiler. I think people kind of expect him to eventually save the world, but
who knows? So
there's a lot of like really crazy dialogue, and the messenger is just kind of like this skeptical, kind of sarcastic. You know, I feel like this is the kind of music that would be going through his head while he was slicing and dicing through monsters. Kind of like a dancey, very kind of like picturing himself in like The Matrix, or, you know, being that kind of like really cool, slick action hero. So yeah, I think, you know, trying to get into his head, I think that's a great term for what this music ended up sounding like. Because if he were kind of a very by the books, train every single day kind of a ninja, I think, you know, maybe like a traditional Oriental soundtrack might have been more appropriate. But I think this music really kind of fits the messenger's character.
Yeah,
you know?
I think it's, you know, I don't come from that background, the Orient, if you will. Working on this game was just me trying to do my best based on the developer's faith in me for already having done my best. And he was like, I love your music, and I want you to make new music for this game. And
very cool.
Just kind of, yeah.
So in terms of writing the soundtracks, did you have to do a lot of revisions when you wrote these songs, or were they kind of like...
Oh, God, yes. No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like my discard pile could be like 4 albums long versus like the 2 albums we ended up with. So yeah, for every one song that ended up in the game, there's 4 to 5 songs that no one will ever hear.
Wow. So what were the major challenges in trying to get the feel for, like, did you originally like start off like too heavy, too metal, and then he wanted you to go more dance with a lot of the stuff, or how did?
No. He didn't hear anything that's not in the game. I don't send anything that I'm not confident in. That's the thing. Is
so you were your own critic, basically.
Exactly. So it sucks, but It is what it is, you know. So
yeah.
I just the song, I wouldn't like see that. It wouldn't be like a full song. So let's just get that out of the way. It's not like a full song.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would just get to a certain point where it's just not going anywhere, or I'm just not happy with it, or I just didn't feel like I would just kind of start somewhere and then end up somewhere else and then just abandon that idea before I spent too much time on it, kind of thing. There's a lot of that, and that's just my life. That's just any composer's life is like that. It's not, you know, I mean, you could probably get a full album's worth of all of the discarded riffs and ideas that I had. It's not an album that I want to listen to, so no one will hear it.
There you go. Maybe they'll be, you know, tucked in your back pocket for inspiration for future soundtracks.
There's actually one. Okay, there's more than one, but there's definitely one song that came out of working on this game that I'm probably just gonna keep for myself and turn into a different song.
Cool.
So,
excellent. Nice to have at least a little bit of refuse there that you can kind of.
There's one for sure, and there's maybe more, but there's definitely one song.
Gotcha. So once you were happy with the song that you had, you turned it into Thierry, and he was like, "Cool, we're throwing this in the game." There wasn't much back and forth.
Yeah, and that's kind of what made me even more self-conscious about all of this, was that there really wasn't any negative feedback happening. I'm like, "Are you sure?" You know, it's like very.
Yeah. So what you were giving him was going to be listened to by the masses. You had to make sure that it was something you were confident in.
Let's be clear that the masses, I have no perspective of that, because it's the first game I've ever worked on, and so I'm still kind of like, you know, my Twitter has been more active in the last like 3 weeks than it ever has in the last like 8 years I've had Twitter. Probably just because of people who have played the game and they've been like, the soundtrack is amazing, and like thank you a lot. You know, that's just like, it's unreal. I don't know how to even acknowledge that kind of reception.
Well, you deserve it, man, because it is a fantastic soundtrack, and the game's been getting great reviews. I mean, I haven't seen anything lower than like an 8 out of 10 on a lot of these websites, and so people are just really kind of eating it up.
I've seen a few rants on why it's not good, but I don't believe them, because it's a good game.
Those guys don't know what they're talking about.
It's definitely a sick game. I can vouch for that personally, having played it.
Yeah, I mean,
no biased opinion whatsoever.
And I'm one of those guys that I start a game and then I'll play like, you know, halfway through it, and then something shiny will come down out of the ether, and I'll be like, ooh, that game looks fun. I'll try that one out, and then come back to this. And I never go back to it.
I rarely finish games.
This is one of the few games.
I rarely finish games.
Yeah.
I finish them sometimes.
Same here. And this is one of the few games that I've actually like stuck all the way through. And I was like, sick. I'm not even going to look at another game until I see the ending to this one. So, and it was totally worth it. So anyways, yeah, let's move on to another one of my favorite tracks. This is kind of a banger.
Oh, yeah.
This one is from Glacial Peak. And the 8-bit version is called The Frozen Light. And the 16-bit version is called The Frozen Dark. So did you name these tracks, each mirror image of each of them, the song
Yes,
titles?
I named them.
Cool.
You know, each version is slightly different, and thus the name was slightly different for each world. So
awesome.
Because it's still the same track, but it's, you know, it's a little different. So
yeah, and then when you've got these two albums, they basically, you know, on Bandcamp, you purchase the albums. You can buy them separately, right? I think there's Volume 1 and Volume 2. I'm pretty sure that's how I did it. So it makes sense that there are two different names, because if you got them all...
Yeah, they're different songs. They're the same song, but they're different songs, so they should be named differently. It's more exciting than just saying Glacial Peak 16-bit or Howling Grotto 18-bit.
That's not creative.
24,000-bit version. Remix. MIDI.com.
Yeah, breaks your speakers in half every time you listen to it. All right, so let's get on to the music, and we'll give it a listen. right, that was The Frozen Light and The Frozen Dark from the Glacial Peak stage from The Messenger, composed by our guest of the day, Rainbowdragoneyes. This one's got a really, heroic feel to it, and I know, so this takes place kind of near the end of the linear portion of the game.
Just when you think your adventure is coming to an end.
That's what I was getting to, is you kind of feel like, all right, I'm climbing up this mountain, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna finally beat this game. It's got this very kind of Wanderers from Ys Falcom soundtrack feel, where the hero is just out on his journey and everything's gonna be great and we're gonna beat everybody and never get injured, and then you fall off a mountain and die, So,
whoops.
But I find myself, when I'm listening to most of these tracks, being a little more attracted to the 16-bit version. I think that's just my affinity for FM.
That's fine. I'm glad to hear it, especially considering the 8-bit version happened first most of the time, and then knowing that I didn't fall flat on doing a second version of the same song is nice to hear.
But for this particular track, I think I actually, that the square wave bass tone, or it's almost really low and gritty. It almost feels like a sawtooth, but I think it's probably a square. But that bass tone feels really, really nice on the NES version. It's a little warmer and a little rounder on the FM, and it still sounds great.
Fully triangle bass, always triangle bass, usually. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like
I'll usually double up with some of the sawtooth,
from the VRC6.
Oh yeah.
Okay, maybe that's why I'm kind of getting it confused a little bit, but I don't know. The bass riff just sounds great on the NES. This track for me feels like the game is going to end. It just feels like the messenger's just got his confidence. He knows that his journey is gonna finally be done when he gets to the top of this.
So that's all I had to do. I had to bring the scroll to the top of the mountain.
That's all they told me to do. My journey's over.
And that's
I'm going to go home and drink some beers afterwards. Yeah. But it doesn't always work out like that. So
such is life.
So is this one of the tracks where you wrote the 8-bit version first?
It is, fully.
Okay.
And the only thing I really had to go on was, I think it said something to the effect of, not sure, but maybe a synth that sounds like icicles, and then there was a Sonata Arctica reference. It was one of the, anyway, just sounded really chilly. It was like a chilly sounding synth in the song that he sent me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I was I had the little sleigh bells going,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that's you gotta have sleigh bells for a nice level. It's just
come on. 'Tis the season.
It's Donkey Kong Country. You gotta have sleigh bells. It's just, and I hate ice levels. I'm kind of.
Well, they're slippery and they're cold and
Exactly. It's the slippery that always.
Everyone likes to be comfortable
and of course there's always ice mixed with lots of spikes, and this level has both of those in spades. So I was pulling my hair out for a lot of this. But the music just sounded so driving and so heroic that it really kind of, I feel like the tune in this level kind of helped me get through all that stupid ice crap, so I could finally get through to what I thought was the end of the game. But but we'll get to that.
There's much more to that, my friend.
Exactly. So speaking of which, let's transition into the only boss track that we're going to be playing for the podcast. So the cool thing about the game is that every boss has its own particular boss theme, which is neat. It's not just Mega Man, where you get one boss song. But this is the boss music from the Arcane Golem. And Eric, you listed this as one. It was probably the only boss music I think you listed as your favorite tunes that you kind of listed out for me for the show.
Yeah.
And I feel like this one's got a lot of metal influences in here. Why did you pick this one out of all the other boss tracks?
It's funny because, I was talking earlier about how I'm always afraid of ripping people off by accident. Well, this one I actually ripped myself off on purpose. This was the riff in the that was a song that I had wrote for my band Magic Hammer that has not been released yet because I'm not sure if the song is actually done or not, which it isn't, because that's the only reason I haven't released any Magic Hammer music in a long time.
Gotcha. That's really funny because in my notes I wrote down to ask you do you think this music sounds more like the stuff that you release outside of video games? So I guess I was kind of on the money there.
Yeah, so, yeah, I guess you were. But that was from a song called Century of Cold. And it was just like a synth riff during the verse that was just kind of... It was like sort of harsh, like growling death metal vocals, but that was the melody that kind of carried the verse along. And I was just like, man, I'm kind of slacking on getting that song finished. And just the whole project as a whole, that's a whole nother podcast series that we can talk about that. But it was a cool riff that I liked, that I wrote, and that I wasn't using. So I was like, well, let's just maybe work that into this. I actually initially had a completely different song for this boss. And the original brief was... Have you ever played... you played Chrono Trigger?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The very end of Chrono Trigger, where it's just kind of like really epic and emotional, and it's just like, all hope is lost, but all you can do is just, push through as much as you can. It's just really sad kind of music playing, and there's all these explosions, and the world is ending, but it's just really sad music playing instead of this really intense kind of thing. I had something like that originally in some of the earlier revisions of the game, but it just wasn't really working. It was like, maybe I didn't hit it right on the money with the track, or it was just kind of the wrong idea. Eventually, it was just like, that was the brief I got, was like, try to hit that emotional sort of hot button, if you will. I wasn't fully feeling the track that I made at the time, and wouldn't you know it, that was like, okay, so that was like the one kind of like negative feedback that I didn't even get right away. It was just kind of like, it's not quite working for this. And there was a couple of people chiming in on that. So I was like, okay, great. So here's a new boss theme, and that was the one that's in there. I was like, all right, well, what if we just sort of ramp up the intensity and just make it like a sick kind of like boss music, evil sounding song.
Super intense and crazy. Yeah. So let's give it a listen. When we come back, we'll maybe talk a little bit about your approach to boss music versus your approach to like standard level music. So let's listen to the Arcane Golem boss music from The Messenger. Alright, that was the Arcane Golem from The Messenger, composed by Rainbowdragoneyes. A real headbanger. There's some dance stuff in there now that I'm kind of listening to it again. It's kind of like a spastic kind of a dancing, but it's definitely in there.
That's my life.
So now as far as boss music goes, kind of what I was talking about during our last break, how did you approach boss music versus your standard kind of level music? I know some of the bosses have both 16-bit and 8-bit modes, but some like the bosses from the earlier, like the first third of the game, you're only doing 8-bit. So did you have that in mind, like composing for things that you might think might not sound good in FM, and did it change the way you approach the music?
Yeah, like not like that specifically, but like there were bosses that we knew from the beginning would be in both dimensions. and there were bosses that we knew would only be in 8-bit. And Manfred, for instance, was only in 16. Boss music, just in general, I feel just has to be more intense than the level. It just has to sound different. And in my mind, you're fighting a boss that's like an intense, like fast-paced kind of thing. So by default, they had to be faster tracks to feel slightly more intense, like more urgent than getting through a level, for instance. So that's basically it. Like faster pace, so they're shorter songs. I mean, if you're real sick at playing the game, then you can beat them pretty quick, I guess. But
yeah, and it's got to match the intensity of the action on the screen too. So
yeah,
and it's funny, a lot of these bosses, like some of them I would get to, and I just like tear them down in like one try, and I was like, oh, that was easy peasy. But then I get to the next boss, and it would take me like
not so much.
Right, 20, maybe not 20 tries, but maybe a dozen tries or so to get through it. And then I get to the next boss, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be even harder. I'd get through it in one. I think it wasn't necessarily because the bosses were more or less difficult. I think it's because they all have their own little quirks and patterns, and it's really depends on how quickly you figure out what these patterns are. It's almost like playing a puzzle game at the same time as playing an action game. You gotta,
That's kind of the secret to playing the Messenger in general, is just learning your moves and how to utilize them, and in an efficient way. That's a hard thing to say, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, watching speedrunners play this game would be really cool, because they'll just be kind of like flipping off the walls and doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
It was definitely built with speedrunners in mind. So, why don't you step up and make a speed run?
Please do. I'd love to watch that. That would be awesome. So the arcane golem itself is like totally metal looking too. It's just this giant floaty energy being with this kind of like big hood. He's got like purple smoky torso.
It's like three dudes who wear trench coats normally, but they're all under one trench coat.
Yeah, they're all like standing on each other's heads trying to get into an R-rated movie or something, but they have superpowers at the same time.
Yeah. Which you would use to get into an R-rated movie.
Yes, exactly.
But also to, test your potential messenger.
Yeah, so there's these blue robes, they're called. That's what they're referred to. They're these kind of like monk-like characters that are actually freaking hilarious. There's some great writing in this game. And they kind of guide you on your way, and sometimes they're kind of obtuse. They don't really give you clues that are understandable at first, and sometimes they're just like, hey buddy, you just gotta go over here and do this thing. That's how you get to the next part of the game. But in between, they're telling you stories, and they're giving you advice, giving you history about the game, and really kind of filling out this world that you're kind of traveling through. And I think these blue robes are really kind of essential to the theme and the atmosphere of this game. And so this arcane golem is this creature that they kind of like Voltron style turn into to kind of test you to make sure that you're ready for this next part of the game that's coming up.
Yeah.
And there's a really cool throwback to I think it's the final boss from Ninja Gaiden 2 with the arms that come in to try to swipe you off the level. Like, I think I'm trying to remember. I think it's Ninja Gaiden 2. Like, the last boss has those arms that kind of come in.
I gotta wonder if Thierry has a lot of the same problems when he's working on game design elements, if he's worried about ripping people off or he's trying to pay homage to them.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard him talk, and I feel his love for the Ninja Gaiden series. And, I feel like just the way that the character of the messenger looks and how he behaves, it really is kind of a love letter to Ninja Gaiden. So I don't feel like he's really ripping anything off at all. I feel like it's definitely like
borrowing or what have you.
Exactly. And like, I really enjoyed how this worked in Ninja Gaiden. I want to put my own spin on it. So, this arcane golem, when these arms come in from the screen, you can actually jump on top of the arms and then jump off the arms to like hit him in the head. And in the original Ninja Gaiden 2 game, I think the arms were just, if you hit them, you got hit. You couldn't use them as a tool to help destroy the boss. So
you're screwed.
Yeah, he really kind of added his own spin to it, which was really cool. So we were just talking about these blue robe guys. Next track we got coming up is another duel. It's called the Arcane Shop / The Shopkeeper, and this is the track that plays inside the shop where you kind of meet and talk with at least one of the blue robes. You kind of learn about who they are.
You'll definitely end up there more than once in your journey.
Much more than I originally thought when I started popping in there to buy some stuff. So let's take a listen to the Shopkeeper song, and we'll be back. All right, that was the Arcane Shop / This Shopkeeper from The Messenger, composed by our guest, Eric Brown. You hear this song quite a bit during the game. I've never got tired of it. And I was actually really excited when I went into the shop once the 16-bit level started coming up, and I realized that I wasn't like an 8-bit shop, regardless of what I was in on the other side of the level. So when I walked in and I saw a 16-bit version of the shop and heard an FM version of the song, I was like, yes, now I get twice the amount of awesome music. So yep. It was really cool. For this track, I really like... So there's kind of like two different parts. So you get that beginning, like the A section, dun 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 da da, and then that second really kind of more dancey part. I feel like I'm kind of split here. I really like the grittiness of the NES tones at the beginning, and then once it gets into that dancey version, I kind of switch over and really like the FM version of that a lot more. I feel like the tones just kind of really meld together. And
well, that's okay, because if you play the game, you get both. So
exactly.
You don't have to choose, you know?
Exactly. Or I can just make my own edit where I can just
do that. By all means, do that. I'm already done working on it, so, do all the work you want onto making that happen. And then send me the link when you're done. So
perfect. I'll put it up on my YouTube channel.
All right, sick.
Excellent. So anyways, yeah, it's kind of a simple track. It's just kind of two parts that kind of alternate back and forth. But you, like I said, you spend a lot of time in this shop, and the melody is just so catchy, and I honestly have woken up a couple mornings, like, just get out of bed, and I'm like, dun, 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 like making coffee, and I'm like, where is this song coming from? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's the shop. So,
oh yeah. Nice.
Really kind of a testament to how much of an earworm this is. I really liked it. This isn't one of the ones that you put on the list for your favorites for the show, but I felt like I had to add it in because it's just
it was one of the first
cool
tracks I ever wrote for the game. This was right after the Autumn Hills tracks.
Okay, cool.
Was the shop track, and because like when they were working on the early versions of the game, the demo. And it was like, okay, yeah, you go into the shop here, so we kind of need the shop track. I'm like, all right, no problem. So, gave him the shop track. He's like, yeah, so here's like, the shopkeeper, and he's like kind of sarcastic and quirky, but he's also like kind of mysterious and sort of is a very important character in the whole storyline. And that's what I came up with, and then I sent it to him like, yep, that's it. That's the one. So.
Cool. So did Thierry do all of the writing for the game?
Yes, he did. This was his vision, and then he assembled the dream team of all of his favorite people to bring it to life.
Gotcha. So he's not only like a fantastic storyteller, but he's a really funny guy because I was literally laughing out loud for a lot of these shopkeeper stories.
And I think the funniest part about him, I mean, he's an incredibly funny dude, but the funniest part about him is when he becomes self-conscious about the sort of jokes that get lost in translation as a native French speaker.
Okay.
And I'm just like, dude, like, it's cool. Like, you're funny. Like, it's like, he's like, I mean, I don't really know if this joke kind of lands right. You know, he'll kind of consult me as a native English speaker to sort of modify, you know, or it's just like, here's something like, does this make sense? Does this translate? I'm like, yeah, like, you know, you got it. I think he's smarter than he gives himself credit for. So.
I would never have known that it was written by a non-native English speaker. The dialogue flows so well.
Well, his grasp of the English language is more fluent than he'll admit to. So,
well, it definitely shows, and so I look forward. You know, hopefully, if there are more games or add-ons to this game, that he'd write some more dialogue. Even if Sabotage ends up doing other games, it would be really cool to hear what else he's got swimming around in that head.
I think there are some others just waiting in the wings, and
Excellent.
I feel like this was sort of the golden ticket into producing the next game.
Awesome.
So
very cool.
You know, the point is that we did it. You know, and we all did it together. And I think that was really objective one.
Yeah, this really seemed like a passion project for me.
Oh, fully. I mean, very much so. Like, I became very much invested in completing this project and seeing it through to the end and giving everything that I could to make it as sweet as possible. There was a time at which we realized that we had a hard deadline to meet, and it was like, well, if we continue at this pace, which is working normal, healthy 8 hours a day, then if we do that every day until the deadline, we could come up with this product. Mm-hmm. But if we want to maybe work 12 to 16 hours a day, then we could come up with this product. And I think everyone it was a no-brainer. It was like, yeah, let's do that. Obviously, like, why would you even give this the option? You know, like, everybody was just like, yeah, of course, let's do that. Yeah. So
and it's fantastic because, you know, that work, you end up with a product that's ageless. You know, that extra work that you put into, you make a game, and then that game persists throughout time. So that extra effort is something that's always there.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, but it's really hard to even keep that in mind when you're doing this because, you know, you start out by making something you want to make just because, and that's how it starts. But then you get people interested in it, and they want to invest in your product. And for instance, Devolver came along, and then I think at that point we sort of figured out when we needed to ship it, or when realistically we could ship it. So it has to be in this sort of time frame. And then that just kind of like lit a fire under everyone. It was like, you know, what can we do in the meantime to make that the most it could be? Even given that deadline, there was still, well, what if this feature is completely broken, or this and that and the other thing? And there was kind of that like looming sort of, you know, this is something that we definitely need to fix before we ship the game. But you know, all of that practical kind of stuff ended up working out brilliantly, and then all the extra stuff that we got to add ended up contributing to the finished product. And I think if we had even more time, anyone on this team would probably be more than happy to work on this game for the rest of their life and just make it the best it could be. Yeah. But, you know, at some point you have to be realistic and like, okay, we actually have to finish this, otherwise it's all for nothing.
Right.
Because why would you spend years of your life working on something that no one will ever see? You know, it's like, well, you could do that for yourself, but then also you still have to, you know, pay your electricity bill so you can turn your computer on to actually work on it. So that comes into play at some point. And
Yeah.
it was like mostly just setting the hard deadline, and it was the game had progressed to a point where it was like it's very obvious what this is and what it could be, and so here's the deadline. Realistically you could ship this game in that amount of time, but it was like we wanted to just put that much more into it to make it that much more special.
Yeah. Well, the takeaway for me as a gamer is that I'm glad to hear that the team still has a fire in them to create more stuff around this world, and that they're not burned out by the whole process or soured by it. I hear Devolver Digital is a great company to work with, so
yeah, they're amazing. They're so cool. They're awesome people, and they're very hyped on this, and we're all very ecstatic to be working with them. We created this universe that you could essentially just extract anything you want out of that. Like there's very much potential for Messenger 2, for instance, if we chose to make that happen. So
excellent. That would make my day for sure.
And there's other games that Thierry and all of us want to make together, and I think the core team has been fully established, and there's definitely more to come from this core team. So
cool. So you kind of feel like you might be becoming like the in-house Sabotage composer at this point?
Oh, it's already done.
Excellent.
That's already a done deal. But I can say without revealing too much that there's another project that we want to work on, and it just so happens that they want to work on me with said project. And once again, I'm going to go in completely blind and completely like I'm out of my league, and like, well, okay, but it's just we work really well together, and so their confidence in me is giving me the confidence that I need to live up to their expectations. And then
Great.
but I always try to go beyond that. So they set the groundwork by having expectations. I'm like, okay, so that's the bare minimum. And so what can I do to like do the bare maximum? We'll see what happens.
Totally understand, and then it helps you grow as a musician and
yeah,
as
absolutely.
a chiptune artist. So you come out even better in the process. So I think the title of our next song is probably very appropriate for this conversation. It's called "Find a Way," and "Know the Way." This is from the Dark Cave, and I'm gonna break my rule a little bit here. I've been doing the 8-bit version first, and then the 16-bit version. We're going to switch it up, because when you enter the Dark Cave in the game, you are introduced to the 16-bit version of the music first, and then you enter some portals to get you into the 8-bit version. And I really love, there's a kind of a drum solo at the beginning of this tune that sounds really, really good in the 16-bit version. So I want to kind of show that off.
Nice.
And play the 16-bit version first. So we'll start with that and transition over to 8-bit, and then we'll be right back and talk a little bit more about it. All right, folks, that was the music from Dark Cave. That was the 16-bit version first, called Know the Way, and then the 8-bit version called Find a Way. And like I said, I broke a little bit from form here to play the 16-bit version first. I really like that little drum solo at the beginning. When you come into this dark cave, it's literally a dark cave. I mean, there's no other way to really describe it. It's just kind of a circle of light around you. Everything is dark. And then you've got this music in the background that kind of creeps in, little like water droplets of synths kind of like falling on either side of your speakers. It's got a very spy kind of a feel, almost got like a GoldenEye meets like Nightmare Before Christmas kind of Tim Burton feel. It was just really atmospheric.
Oh, nice.
It really kind of fit exactly what I was seeing on the screen. And it was almost,
that's great.
Kind of frightening and claustrophobic feeling. I was like, oh my goodness, where am I going? So, what were the notes that you got for this particular section of the level that caused you to write a song like this?
I could say the brief that I got for this was just an image file that was just black. But it was literally everything that could lead up to that being accurate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, okay, go ahead and try and see what happens. And so, if you go into this cave without the candle, then it's just, you don't know where you're going.
Right.
But you could still get through it. I mean, the level is still there, but you just can't see anything. So
yeah, and there's a lot of like little crevices and alleyways that you have to like kind of maneuver yourself through to get through this level. You wouldn't really be able to do it without picking up the candle first.
And I think this was an earlier track that I did, and it was kind of before at least I sort of really had a feel for the game as a whole. And I think like I started this whole game with like, okay, there's going to be like 12 levels or something like that. And I was like, all right, 12 songs, so 2 versions of each song, that's 24 tracks. And then we ended up with 59 songs to work. So it was like it definitely like evolved beyond the initial scope, but this level for sure was like the classic like, okay, it's you and there's like you can't see where you're going. It's in a cave, so make it sound like you're in a cave and it's dark, essentially.
And it definitely worked. I wrote some notes while I was listening to the track earlier today, and my favorite one was feels like James Bond goes trick-or-treating. I think that kind of describes.
That's so good. Oh, man. Yeah, for sure James Bond trick-or-treating is the best way to describe it.
Spooky spy tunes.
That's so good. Hey, Halloween's coming up, too.
It's true. We should all get our James Bond masks on and
have a spooky day, everyone.
Yeah, Bluetooth speakers. We'll just play this track out of our Bluetooth speakers as we go from door to door getting candy.
Free candy.
Free candy. And ninja masks. James Bond with ninja masks. Right. So anyways.
That's fine. All good.
Next track we got coming up is another one of my favorites. You said it a little better than I probably will with my bad French, but it's pronounced Rivière Turquoise, or the Blue River.
Rivière Turquoise.
There you go. So it's the Poisoned River on the 8-bit world and the Blue River on the 16-bit world. We'll talk a little bit about why that is when we come back. So let's take a listen. we are back. That was Rivière Turquoise, The Poisoned River, and The Blue River. Absolutely one of my favorite tunes, especially the 16-bit version.
Nice.
The snare in this song, definitely makes this track just absolutely pop for me. It's huge.
Oh, yeah?
Huge snare.
You like that snare, huh?
Big snares. I like the snares.
Big snares. Big snares. I pride myself on big snares.
Well, good, because it succeeded very well on this one. There was, there was one part in this level where I got, not stuck, but just, I think it had something to do with, like, vents and spikes and whatever.
Which part?
Oh, man, I don't remember. It was right near, it was like the screen to the left of a shop area where I would just keep continuing over and over again, but it was in 16-bit mode. And so I would hear the beginning of this song over and over again. So every time that I would, fail, I would go back to the shop and, respawn and get to hear that awesome introduction again. So I really kind of started focusing on that, and it helped me from getting pissed off at the game. So music really helps.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
I mean, there are games out there where that would happen for me. Like Super Adventure Island on the Super Nintendo is kind of a not great game, but it's got this amazing Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack. So I've beaten that game, even though, if that soundtrack didn't exist on that game, I probably never would have given it a second thought. But sometimes the tunes really do help you get through parts that are frustrating.
I mean, when all else fails, you have music.
And you can just use that to grab onto. It's your life preserver. I'm curious as to what your brief was, because the 8-bit version of this level graphically is just this kind of wasteland, and there's water on the bottom of the stage, and it's just this kind of green mush on the NES or the 8-bit side, and then it's this really lush garden on the 16-bit side. So did your brief mention any of that at all, and did you try to compose a music that would sound like it fit in both of those kind of diametrically opposite kind of environments?
I think so. Like, for sure, I knew that a tree hugger messenger at somewhere along the timeline had come along and, brought this area back to life. Mm-hmm. But originally, it was just kind of... I definitely wrote it in 8-bit first. I mean, it's a core level. I feel like they're all core levels, but it just needed something to get you through, and definitely laid the groundwork in terms of the brief that they sent. It was but then I think that was one of the ones, in my opinion, that kind of translated really well to 16.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it was just kind of a cool song. That was just kind of a sort of weird rhythm I came up with. Just having that to work with in a 16-bit universe. I just felt really good about it overall. Even not knowing much about the level, it was kind of it's not like a bonus thing, but it was it definitely came to life later in the dev cycle.
Gotcha.
So it was it wasn't fully realized at first. There was a shorter version of this track that was the working version for a long time, until the rest of the game really took shape and was this is an actual level. And so I basically made it twice as long.
I definitely feel like the song's a little bit more experimental sounding, maybe you were getting a little more comfortable with the things you could do.
I think rhythmically, certainly. Yeah, I think that's a prime example of just trying to make a good song instead of trying to make a Nintendo song.
Yes,
absolutely. Not that I would ever fall back on that, but that was kind of the starting point for a lot of things, and then it would kind of grow from there. But this was kind of let's just make a track with these sort of loose guidelines
and just see where it goes.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, and I really appreciate that for this, because like I was saying, it doesn't it's not your standard kind of a dance track. I don't know. I don't know why I like it so much. I'm a big industrial fan, so I really like Skinny Puppy and 9 Inch Nails and KMFDM, and this kind of, I had that kind of feeling. I don't know. It's not necessarily a true industrial track, whatever industrial might be. I don't like to pigeonhole stuff like that, but it felt experimental and electronic enough that it didn't really fit any kind of particular genre, and I think that's what really appealed to me about this one.
Well, that's kind of interesting too, because it like the original version that I had, it was like half as long, first of all, but then it had less parts, and then once I sort of felt like it wasn't long enough, which was immediately, but I was just like, well, I'll get back to this one. But then I was like, I wrote some other songs, and then I came back to this one, like, okay, how can we make this a better song? And sort of make it longer, because it needs to be longer. And then the whole, like, B or C section, whatever it is, and there's like, weep, 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 like that whole section. That kind of came much later. And it was just like me just trying to extend the initial idea that I had. I was like, this is a good enough idea to hang on to. And then just trying to take that somewhere else. And I was like, well, let's just add some shit, you know, or some stuff, what have you.
Yeah.
And, so, I don't know, I was just having fun with it. And then I feel like I got way better at writing towards the end of this, because it was like, I mean, by the end of this project, I was ready to make like 59 more songs. Like, I was like, it's just pouring out of me at this point. Like, once you get into that zone of like having to create for something with a deadline versus just creating for the sake of creating, which I've always done, but having an imposed deadline really makes you sit down and just really go for it. Like, it's like, well, it has to be done one way or the other. Like, they're gonna ship this game whether or not this level song is crap or not. So I want to make it as good as I can, because potentially people will listen to it and also hear it and like it. So,
and it worked. I mean, the version that you shipped, like I said, one of my favorite tracks in the whole game. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely slaps.
Yeah, and it feels good. This level's kind of like, it's off to the side. It's not like a level that you necessarily go through. You kind of go into the level. You
discover it, and then you end up there. Yeah, you end up there, and then
you beat the boss, and then you have to kind of like go back out through the level. So it's more of a story point in the game, and it does kind of give you a little bit more of a it fleshes out the world a little bit more, rather than just be kind of like a stepping stone on the way to the end of the game. So
every level was very specific in its placement and its purpose in the entire world.
Yeah, and this works really well. And I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but the boss is kind of integral to this, why this level is so desiccated in the 8-bit world and so lush in the 16-bit world. So.
Yeah, I feel like every level you play sort of makes sense for why it's there.
Right.
And
very well thought out. So, and you know, like we said before, Terry had a lot of time to flesh out this world in his own mind. So that's why these levels are so cool like that.
He had a lot of time, but then he had not a lot of time to kind of make it realistic. So
to implement it, yeah. So
best of both worlds in that respect.
Exactly. All right, so let's move on to our next track. This is an FM only track, and this is called Manfred the Sky Serpent. back. That was Manfred the Sky Serpent. It's a great name for a Sky Serpent, I gotta tell you.
He's a good Manfred.
He is. He's the Sky Servant as well as the Sky Servant, as you'll come to find out. But yeah, written by Eric W. Brown, our guest of the day. And very dancey track. We were kind of talking while the song was playing, and so there's an interesting history behind this particular track. What was the story behind it?
So this track was written in 8-bit originally on FamiTracker. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say that anyone who contacts me personally after listening to this podcast is entitled to an MP3 of the track that I'm talking about. So I wrote this track in 8-bit initially, just kind of out of nowhere. This was in the early dev cycle, the early stages of working on this game, and I was just like writing music because it was just happening at that point, and we didn't really know where this track was going to go, but it was like, yeah, this is like a good song, but it doesn't really fit any particular level at this moment. And then at the point when I actually saw it in context, which is like the cutscene after the underworld, I was like, well, why is this 8-bit song playing? I was like, you need a 16-bit version of this, obviously, don't you? And they're like, well, yeah. And they're like too shy to say yes, I guess. It was like, yes, because we're in 16-bit at this point, and then the song comes in, so it wouldn't
Can't
really
ship the game like that. Like, that's completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, it wouldn't really make sense if an 8-bit track came in. Even if, like, I feel like half the people in the world don't even know the difference, but it doesn't matter to me at all because I know the difference, and that's why I've been doing the music for this game, is because I know the difference. So,
I know I'd be there scratching my head.
Yes, for sure. Many people would be, and I'm one of them, and I just want to make that very clear. So, so this song was originally written in 8-bit, and I chose to not release it because, well, it didn't appear in the game anywhere. But the event that it was used for was in the 16-bit time frame. So just kind of like slapped together the 16-bit version, and that's the one that ended up in the game. But so the 8-bit version, long story short, even though I already told the long story, but to fast track that, if you just kind of skipped ahead, is that version exists, and if you contact me personally, I'd be more than happy to send it to you.
That's very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
And that you would be the only people to actually have heard that.
So you got to reference the VGMbassy in the email or the tweet or whatever, and you get yourself a copy of the 8-bit version. So I haven't heard it either,
there
so
you
I'm
go.
really looking forward to checking it out.
A copy. Just so you know, it's a copy, and I have the original.
Not the original.
I have the original, and no one will ever have that, but I'll send you a copy of it.
Sell the MP3 on eBay for $1 million.
Yeah, cut me in on that deal, won't you?
So, just a little bit about the track. I got a very kind of like a Euro demo scene vibe from this. Was that kind of what you were thinking?
All right.
You know, it was like a very like, especially in the chord progressions and like a very like whimsical and upbeat feel to it. It didn't feel like VGM to me.
Yeah. You know, let's just go back to the beginning of this conversation where I told you that this was the first game I've ever done, and that I've only ever wrote music for myself prior to working on this game. And yeah, there was a time period in my life in which I became obsessed with Eurobeat music. And it was around the same time I learned how to make music on a computer. And so all of these things kind of came together at the same time, and I was like, well, I want to make Eurobeat music, obviously. So I started out trying to do that. And again, if you want to contact me outside of the context of the show, I'd be happy to maybe show you some stuff, but it's nothing that I would feel comfortable releasing to the general public. But to the informed public, I would be happy to have a conversation about this. So yeah, that was like basically my foray into music production was sort of what's the word where you, not a catheter, but
Catalyst.
Yes, that's the one. It was cathetered by Eurobeat music. So yeah, that's sort of an interesting foray into music production because There's literally nobody else that I know personally on a human level other than online that does that kind of thing. It's also very much not what people are making right now.
Yeah,
but
true.
that was humble beginnings for me a long time ago for a few years, and I was like royally obsessed. I don't even really watch anime or anything, but it was just, it all fits into that world, and that was what I resonated with personally. And there was a producer for, if you're familiar with the Super Eurobeat series, there was a producer from the label Delta by the name of Laurent Gelmetti.
I think I've heard of him.
That, he made a lot of hit songs that were only hits in certain countries, but they were hits. And I feel like he had a hand in the song Night on Fire, which is like a royally famous Eurobeat song. Anyway, he was sort of my unofficial mentor for a time during the MySpace years.
Gotcha.
And I can't even tell you the whole backstory on that, but it was just like, I would just like send him stuff and like, what do you think of this? And be like, oh man, this really sucks. And like, you should really change this. But like, it really sounds like this, which is not the reaction I was expecting after like laboring over this song. Like, I would stay up really late. You know, I have to get up really early for my job the next day, but I would just sleep for like 2 or 3 hours and be fine with that because I was up all night working on something I was really hyped on. And, you know, these are songs that honestly I'm quite embarrassed that I had any hand in creating, but that's just because that was the time period. But at the time, it was very significant to me, and it was very, you know, I was like, I'm all in on this, but that's just how it goes. Like, I was very much 100% invested in what I was creating, and I happened to found someone who was willing to like give me the time of day to offer his like professional opinion and suggestions and such. And so
that's very cool.
Yeah. I was very hyped to send him these things, and only for me to listen to them now and be like, this is like complete garbage.
Well,
like, what was I thinking?
You know, I think everybody at the beginning of their career has done stuff that they're not necessarily happy about.
I would hope so. I would literally hope so, because at the time of them doing that, they were really super into it, and they thought that was it, and that was their meal ticket. But the fact of the matter is that it's not, and that you actually need to just keep making shit for a very long period of time.
Yep, exactly. I mean, I go back and listen to some of my earlier podcasts, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I made these decisions. You know, I'm sure that's
like, what were you thinking?
Right.
But at the time, you were like, man, like, I'm on top of the podcast world, I bet. Like
you think you know everything.
It's just like, that's just how it goes. And it's just, can you imagine where I would be 5 years from now having this conversation with you and thinking about the Messenger soundtrack and everything I could have done better on the Messenger soundtrack? And I would blow my brains out thinking about that right now, but let's just put that to the side for the time being and just be happy with what I've done, which I'm quite honestly very happy with. I think it's great, and I think you'll think it's great as well.
Yes, and I think it's going to stand the test of time too. So I think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I think...
Well, who can tell but Father Time? So we'll see what he has to say about it.
Even if you're not looking back on it, you know, as fondly, I think I'll still be listening to it. So you've got at least got me to count on.
I'm certainly going to refer back to this interview in the next 5 or 10 years.
Put it on your calendar and
be
just
like,
email me. So Ed, are you start listening to the Messenger soundtrack? And I'll be like, yup. Shop theme is still stuck in my head every morning.
Oh, jeez. Well, no refunds. Sorry.
So, God, I feel like this is going to be a really, really long, complicated answer. But, like in a few words, can you describe as a composer the difference in composing chiptune rather than like non-VGM versus VGM in the chip style?
So literally the only difference with that is because it was still me writing the music. So, you know, for like my own solo project, like what Rainbowdragoneyes has been over the years is a performing chiptune act. So And my vision for that was to just have songs that I could sing to people and to do vocals over, chiptune songs. So that was kind of the thing from the beginning. Yeah, with VGM, I mean, it's like literally the same, but the only difference is that the song has to loop at a certain point, and there's no real finite ending and, verse chorus kind of thing. Like, it doesn't really work that way. Like, there's like different sections that you have to work through. I mean, from my own personal experience, and your mileage may vary. Like, there's no right or wrong way to do any of this. I mean, there's probably plenty of wrong ways, but there's no written way that you have to do video game music. It's all very project specific. I mean, that's the whole thing with games, is they're all very different, and there's different needs that have to be met, and there's just different tones you have to convey, and there's different moods and feelings and everything. And literally the main thing was finding that loop point and just making the loop happen at a point where you don't fully notice it. Like, you might notice it. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you're really paying attention, but also maybe it's not, like it has to happen at some point, so you may as well try to make that happen as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, I've talked to other video game composers in the past, and a couple of them, it's funny, I get the same analogy a lot, in that they refer to it as like a roller coaster, because a roller coaster has to begin and end at the exact same level. But you can do anything you want, in between that beginning and end, but it always has to kind of flow to get back to the same point again. And a lot of composers, I think, really kind of struggle with getting that flow.
Yeah, that's a more eloquent analogy than what I just said, but I think the best example would be the Forlorn Temple, like, where it's just kind of like the whole song kind of builds up until it stops, and then it starts over.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like the whole track is just kind of like build, drop. I mean, if you listen to any like so-called EDM music, that's kind of how that works. But then that only happens a finite number of times and the song ends,
Right.
But for this in particular, it was kind of like, I mean, I've never been to like a rave or whatever, and I don't go to like festivals or anything like that, but as a music producer, there's a lot to appreciate from that genre and from the producers that make that type of music.
And even, the crowd, in the sense of EDMs, they expect certain things out of the music, and they get disappointed when it's not there. So you have to, work that into your song at least somehow.
Yeah. So as someone who has never been in that type of situation at like an EDM festival, and who has also never composed music for a video game, I'm sort of like, well, why not try to do both of those things at the same time? Because what could possibly go wrong?
Jump in head first. I mean, that's the only way you can really go about it.
Yeah, it's like I listen to enough music to understand how music is supposed to work, and I play enough video games to where I understand how video games are played. So I don't know, that kind of thing.
It's the perfect storm. I think it all came together pretty well myself. So.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about. Let's listen to the music from the next track. This is the last stage of music of the show, and the last level of the show. This is from the music box. So this is called "To Break the Curse" and "A Melody to Break the Curse." And music box is pretty fitting. You're going to hear some kind of music box style melodies here. So let's give it a listen, and we will be right back. All right, we're back. That was the music box level to break the curse and a melody to break the curse. Yeah, man, this track feels like the journey home to me. It's got a very kind of wistful feel to it, and for a last level, I don't know. I was telling you before, Eric. Like, you look at the last level in like Ninja Gaiden or the last level in Mario, and you've got, you know, giant evil castles with skulls hanging off the walls and lava flying all over the place and then fireballs. And this one's very you're basically inside a music box, and I'm not going to tell you why. I don't want to spoil the whole plot of the game, which before this level you do get this huge kind of cutscene which really explains the whole reason why this whole game is taking place, and it's really well done. And
I should have you know that the music for that cutscene was written while I was on the Vans Warped tour, and I was in the back of a tour bus, and this all happened like a few weeks before the game came out.
Oh my god, I was gonna mention that.
And it was like, by the way, yeah, well, I'll just go ahead and tell you that little anecdote. It was like, so, you know,
it's like an 8-minute epic.
Yeah, 8.5 minutes. It was like, we need a song that's 8.5 minutes long. I'm like,
crazy.
All right, well, I've never done anything like that before, but what could possibly go wrong? So, just like, let's write a song that's 8.5 minutes. And they sent me the, luckily they had the rough cut. And so I had like an early version of the cutscene where they were trying to like figure out the timing. And I was kind of like bugging them for that, actually. Like, it was all kind of coming together at the same time. And it was like, so here's the deal. And it's this whole like really explanatory cutscene. I'm like, okay, cool. How long is it? Like, well, I don't really know. Like, okay, well, I kind of need to know how long it is, you know, before I write a song that's as long as the cutscene. But it was all just coming together at the same time, and then eventually I got like a rough cut. I'm like, okay, so here's kind of like the timing that we were thinking for all that. So I was kind of using that for a guideline for making the cutscene track, which is 8.5 minutes, and it's no easy feat. So.
I believe it, and I was kind of amazed myself. It's called Convocation of the Curse, in case you guys want to give it a listen on, you know, his Bandcamp page or something like that if you're not playing the game. But yeah, it just fit very well. I listened to it by itself before I had even gotten to that point in the game, and I was really enjoying it. And then once I saw it kind of in time with the cutscene and all these, you know, 8-bit animations, it all made sense to me. And
that's really awesome, because I definitely wrote it just as like, well, this is like, I have to write a piece of music that is this long, but also conveys this amount of emotion being poured into the story. Like, this is it's a very important, it's like people can skip the cutscene if they wish, you know, but it's like a pretty explanatory cutscene, like why you're actually playing the game.
Right.
So it's not recommended that you skip this cutscene, and it took a lot of work to make it, but not that I'm trying to guilt trip you into watching it. Like, watch it if you want to watch it, whatever. But just from my perspective, like, yeah, it was like, it's something that had to be done, and it's never been done before. As far as I'm concerned, I've never written a song that's 8.5 minutes long. And I had the original, like the timing with all the frames to kind of like match up with the song, and I had about 50% of it down before I even saw the cutscene, and then they sent it to me. I'm like, wow, this actually matches up, and then I would just sort of go from there. So,
oh, cool. Well, it's good that you were able to get at least part of that done before they sent it to you. But yeah, I mean, I was actually considering throwing it in the show, but I was like, I might just be a little too long, and I really...
It's a kind of a long and boring track, but if you're into, like, prog music...
I wouldn't say boring, but...
Well, if you're into prog music, you'll like it, but if not...
Yeah, and I kind of wanted the people who wanted to watch the cutscene along with the music first to kind of experience it that way, instead of kind of forcing them to listen to it without the cutscene. So, because I think your how you look at the track is really going to change depending on whether you're watching the cutscene or not, you know? So
I think it's boring to me because I've heard it 2,000 more times than anyone who's heard it once. But yeah, it's It's something that is better context with the game itself, with the cutscene and everything. And
Yeah.
on its own, one of our artists happens to like the track very much, and that's just fine because he's a sick dude and he's allowed to like whatever he wants.
No, I mean, I really enjoyed it too, and I like I said, I heard it first by itself, so.
I'm glad to hear that. At the end of the day, we're all just dudes doing stuff, and we got to be dudes after we finish doing stuff. So maybe we're still sick dudes, or maybe not. Who knows?
You just have to be more of a dude after you finish it. I think.
That's really
Gotta
the ticket, isn't it?
Increase your dudeness.
Yeah, that's really the ticket. A lot of people forget about that, so who knows?
Exactly. All right. So, anyways, I think we're supposed to be talking about Music Box.
Oh
Is
yeah,
that where we
Music
were going
Box.
with it?
Yeah, what a good level, Music Box.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So you were telling me that there was some really interesting stuff that was planned for the Music Box that didn't end up making it into the game, but that this was supposed to be the level was supposed to kind of be interactive with the music in a sense. So how was that?
Yeah, that was the original intention from like 3 years ago. Was like we're gonna have this level that's reactive to the song, and all the different channels are gonna kind of like play a role in the traps, and you know the stompers and everything. But given the time frame that we had and hadn't fully realized the initial vision of the Music Box, you know, it was all like all the traps were synced up with the song, like you know on the snare hit, you know all the stompers and wall traps would come out on the snare hit.
And that still worked really well. I mean, so
yeah,
like these
I'm
blasts
glad
of
to hear it.
steam
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. But
and it kind of helps you with the gameplay too, because then you're kind of doing wall jumps and jumping over things like in time with the song. So you know, it kind of makes the song feel even more at home with the level that you're in.
And can you imagine like the intimidating prospect of receiving a brief like that? Like, by the way, like this is the absolute epic conclusion to this whole adventure, and by the way, the whole level is going to sync up with every single aspect of the song that you write for this level. And every single channel is going to be reactive in terms of what the level is doing. We want to make it feel like the level is playing the song. So I kind of put that one off until the very last. But
P.S. No pressure, though.
Yeah. By the way, you know, P.S., P.P.S., P.P., P.S., no pressure. But, you know, we didn't really have the time that we wanted to really work on that. But given the time frame that we had, I think the bare minimum was to make like all of the stompers and all the wall smashing traps sync up with the song. So the game was built in Unity, and there was like a feature in Unity that kind of made it possible to do that.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, say what you want about Unity, but you know, if you can make it look like it wasn't built within Unity, then great job.
Yeah,
but
I had no idea. I mean, I've played tons of games that were made in Unity, and I would never have, in my faintest dreams, imagined that. I thought maybe it was its own proprietary engine. So
I don't know
really
if
cool.
that's too skeletal of a thing to sort of throw out there. By the way, that's actually why there's like a memory leak within Unity, just on the Nintendo Switch builds. Like if you're playing for about 4 hours, the game starts to lag, and that's not our fault. That's Unity's fault. And
that has actually happened to me, so I must have been going for a pretty long time.
You were playing for over 4 hours.
That's
so crazy. All you got to do is you got to just reset the game. Like you close it out, you reopen it, and that's fine.
Yeah,
and
this
is
the
a
frame
bug.
rate was starting to drop a little bit. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's not our fault at all. It's 100% Unity. We've been trying to get a hold of them and make them aware of this situation, and they've been somewhat responsive in responding to this. I don't want to, whether or not they're in the process of resolving this right now, I don't want to, talk any bad stuff about them, but that's the issue, and that was a issue from the beginning. It was a known issue, and we had to ship the game, we had to launch and everything, and it's not on us, so.
So that's when you tell everybody it's a feature and not a bug.
Yeah, it's a feature, exactly.
And when that happens, it's time to stop the marathon session and go out and get some sun or something.
So, you're playing a game with time travel. You have to expect that if you're playing for more than 4 hours, that time starts to just slow down naturally.
You gotta break the continuum.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so that's a thing that will be fixed. Hopefully, we're literally talking with Unity directly to try to get a fix for this. They're aware of it. Whether or not people listening to this podcast right now sort of sets that in motion to sort of expedite that even further, but that's a known issue. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it hindered my gameplay enough that I wanted to, rip the game out of the Switch
right.
and throw it on the floor or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like, how dare you? How dare you do this to me as a
Eric,
player?
I blame you personally for this.
It's all your fault. All right.
Maybe the music was just too awesome. The Switch couldn't handle it, and it just...
All right, that's fine. I'll accept that. You take up your griefs with me personally and not somewhere else, so...
So let's talk a little bit about the final track, the staff roll that's going to take us out for the show.
Yeah.
I personally felt like this was more than FM. Am I wrong here? Is this really just Genesis compliant music?
Wow. So, all right. So you called my bluff on this one. So this one I used the arcade engine, which essentially gave me one additional channel to work with. Congratulations for spotting the additional channel.
That's the YM2151, I think.
It's yeah, it was. There's additional. You have more sample channels to work with.
Okay.
So I had that. That was what you were hearing, but it was the same FM chip essentially. So my whole thing with from the beginning was like, well, the staff roll got to be kind of like a mega mix, of like, thanks for playing, like, here's all these themes that you would have recognized had you played the game,
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I tried to like chuck a few of my favorites in there, and so Bamboo Creek and Autumn Hills, and I don't remember what else, Glacial Peak, and
yeah, it's a great little montage. Plus, there's a nice little like drum solo in there too that I heard. That was pretty cool.
That just kind of came out of nowhere. That kind of came. Okay, so maybe it came out of the realization that I had an extra channel to work with finally, and I was just like, you know what? Like, at this point, I was like so convinced that if I had strayed from just the 16-bit Sega Genesis format, that I would get called out on that. And that people would be like, hey man, it's not authentic enough. But at that point, I was just like, you know what? Like, that's not really a realistic way to live life. And so I'm going to add one extra channel. That was my way to get back at them, was to add one extra channel to work with. So
I don't think anyone's going to complain too much, and if they do, I mean, you got better things to complain about.
Yeah, if they do, honestly, I would love to meet them. Like, I really would. I really would love to have a conversation with them. But I did it for them, honestly. Like, I did that so they would call me out on it and be like, this isn't authentic Genesis. And be like, good, I'm glad you noticed. Now the friendship can begin.
At least it shows that they know their stuff, that they can pick it out,
fully. Just like you did. You did. So we're actually real friends now in real life, even though we haven't met in real life. We're actually friends for life now, whether you like it or not.
Well, that means if I ever end up at one of your shows, then I'm buying you a beer. That's how it goes.
Well, okay, then you get into the show for free. So
I would gladly accept that trade.
That's how it works. But but yeah, and that was another track that I wrote while I was on tour, on the Vans Warped Tour, was that track as well as the cutscene track, the Convocation track. So,
Very cool.
I kind of know what this has to be, and at this point I had written 58 other songs. So I kind of had a feel for the whole thing as a thing and what needed to happen. So yeah, I don't know. It came together in a few days of working an hour or two here and there, and as a drummist. It was just like it was a credits like end of game thing. And so I try to think about like movies that I've seen where I sit through the credits to watch what happens after the credits. In general, like you know, you see a lot of like they'll mash up different songs, or they'll just like tastelessly mash up two different songs and just put one right after the other. It's like fade one out and fade in the other one. And that was kind of the inspiration behind this one.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was kind of funny. It really felt like I was watching like an 80s, credits.
Yeah, like that
sequence.
was 100% what I was doing there. So it was
really
like
cool.
I said enough that I needed to say with this initial idea of this song, which actually, by the way, was never intended to be a Messenger song. It was just like something I had started writing on a whim, because that happens from time to time. And that I was like, wait, we actually need a credits song. Like, okay, I have like an idea here that I can kind of work with. It's like kind of a funky beat, you know? And then I just sort of worked in some level themes and then ended up being that, so.
Cool, and it works.
Yeah.
It's a great wrap-up to
Yeah.
the game. And, it's one of those ending sequences where it really feels like there's a sense of closure. Everything kind of wraps itself up nicely, and
That's good, because it might take you longer than you think to beat it, so you would like to think by the time you get to the end that it's actually worth it, so.
Yep. And then there is a little to be continued that appears on the screen, so that's also good for fans of the game.
Well, you never know what's going to happen next. Could be Messenger 2, or could be something else entirely.
Messenger DLC.
But the whole point is that it's to be continued. Oh yeah, DLC's gonna happen. Don't worry about that.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that for sure. So, speaking of wrapping up, that's pretty much gonna wrap up the show. Eric, dude, thank you so much for coming and chilling out and talking about the Messenger.
Dude, my pleasure. What a treat to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'd love to have you back on, even if you want to chat about video games, or if another game comes out that you're composing. Well, we can definitely.
I have so many things to chat about, if that's what you want to chat about. So
Sweet.
You hit me up anytime. Speaking
of chatting, where else can we find your stuff on the web?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. So, Rainbowdragoneyes has a Bandcamp where I've been selling. Most of my original music I've created has been chiptune, and most of that chiptune has been Rainbowdragoneyes, so you can go to rainbowdragoneyes.bandcamp.com, and you can download the entire Messenger soundtrack, 2 discs, 59 tracks. Have at it. You can listen to it for free anywhere you want, probably. It's on Spotify and Google Play and wherever you want. Bandcamp is the best way to support independent artists such as myself, but if you don't care, then you're free to use any other platform that you prefer. I'm on all of them. And you can check out my band Magic Hammer, also on Bandcamp and every other platform. So if you haven't gathered by any of this, I'm a drummer and I play metal music, and tour with a band called Necrogoblicon. And it's like goblin-themed heavy metal, and you can find that in all of the same places, and there's music videos and all that nonsense. And I also play for a death metal band called Veil of Noth, and that's with a silent P, P-N-A-T-H, which is a H.P. Lovecraft reference. But if you like technical death metal, then might be up your alley. And if not, then we have less to talk about than I thought initially.
I mean, I just love Lovecraft, so that's good
there you
enough
go.
for me.
So yeah, it was the Lake of Bones in the underworld, where these creatures would carry people to die, and they ended up in the Vale of Noth. And then we wrote some hard to play metal songs based on that concept. So there's that. That's where I've been all day today, was in the studio recording new stuff for that. So
very cool.
And then I also dress like a pirate sometimes, and play in a band called Swashbuckle, which is kind of thrash metal. It's like a new album of that stuff, like 30 songs coming out pretty soon.
Sweet.
But been all over the world doing that nonsense. And I'm just here trying to make cool stuff that people like. And if they don't like, then that's their problem, and I'm still going to do it anyway. So
You are a man of many hats.
Thank you. I have my own hat closet. I'd love to show you some time if you come visit me in Colorado.
Do the hat tour of Eric's house? Yes.
So many hats. I
All
hope
right,
you
man.
like hats.
So, hats are the best. I don't. I own a couple hats, but I could always use more.
Okay.
So
All right.
maybe I'll just steal some of yours.
Respect.
Perfect. All right, man. So, I will have links to all of Eric's stuff on the show notes, so you can go to VGMbassy.com, look for the post where the show is located, scroll down a little bit, you'll see a whole bunch of links to all of his stuff, Bandcamp links, video links, etc., etc.
Or not. We're not telling you what to do, but we're just telling you what you could do.
You should, is what I'm telling you, because it's quality stuff.
You're telling me, okay, he's telling you should do it, and I'm telling you could, just because I was there when it happened, but it's up to you from now on.
Yes, free will is, I guess, invoked here. But
yeah.
You should. I'll just leave it at that.
That's it.
And also you can find our show on thevgembassy.com. You can find my Twitter at thevgembassy. I'm on Instagram at thevgembassy. Facebook.com/groups/thevgembassy. We are everywhere. Come say hi to us. You can also join our Discord. If you go to the top of the VGMbassy.com page, you'll see a Discord invite link. And that is an open link, so you can come join our chat whenever you want. That's a very active Discord channel with a ton of people. So speaking of the website, you can also visit our Patreon site there. And I would like to thank our Patreon patrons at the Taurus level, Chris Murray, Cameron Childs, and Sure You Kenny. Our VG Emissary level, Scott McElhone, Chris Myers, Donovan Orofino, and Ben the Dyad Dishman. Our audio attaché members, Cameron, Worma, and Carlos. And at the VG Ambassador level, Alex the Messenger. Yes, his real name is Alex Messenger.
Wow.
And we call him the Messenger. And that was even before this game came out.
What a guy.
Yeah. So he was really excited about this game, and I guess you can imagine why. So
yeah.
He actually came up with a lot of the questions that I asked you during the show. So he was really excited to hear this show because he was a really big fan of the music too. So
cool.
You have a messenger, a real live messenger in your midst.
Well, a messenger is always needed, so.
It's true. He's got to deliver the scroll to the next podcast or something.
Sure. Hey, man, thanks for everything.
And thank you, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing whatever you guys come up with next, both Sabotage and all your other bands.
Thanks for having me. What a treat.
When you come up with a good theme, maybe we can just do like a generic like video games that influenced your composition or something. We can put a show together and get back together and do some more.
All right. You got about 10 years. You got about 10 years set aside for that one, because
I got all the time in the world, bruh.
All right, sounds good to me.
All right. So thank you again for hanging out with me, and we will see you next time on the VG Embassy. Peace out.
Cheers.